Okay. All right. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Diane Monig, and I'm the transition manager here at the ARC of Northern Virginia. I'd like to welcome you all today to our webinar, Life After High School, Finding the Right Fit for Neurodiverse Learners. We're so excited to have Judy Bass from Bass Educational Services here today. Judy is an expert in the field of college and post-secondary placement for students who learn differently. She is a certified educational planner and has developed College Web LD, a one-stop source of information on college disability services at over 400 colleges in the US. So this presentation is being recorded, and the recording, along with the PowerPoint slides, will be emailed to you. I'm going to try and put them in the chat box so you can pull them up now. I will also share with you links at the end of this to the ARC of Northern Virginia's Transition Points Guides, Securing a Future for Your Child with a Disability and Entering the World of Work. Both of those guides can be found on our website and provide practical information on transitioning from high school to adult services and post-secondary options, with lots of contact information for a variety of resources and providers in our area. So just a few logistics for today. You are all muted, so please use the chat box or the Q&A to type your questions, and I'll be monitoring those, and Judy will take the questions at the end. And there was a question, just a reminder, so the audience is all on mute and none of you are visible, just the presenters are visible. Okay, and with that, we will get started. Thank you again, Judy, for sharing all of this information. And I think we're gonna start with a poll to help Judy get a better sense of the information that you all want. So she is directing her information accordingly. Let me provide that. So if you could take that, that would be awesome. And Judy, can you see that on your screen? Okay.
Mm-hmm. I see the question, yeah.
Okay, so it looks like the majority are interested in post-secondary programs to assist with life skills, but still a strong showing of 30% for four-year colleges.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Mm-hmm.
And some chatted in the chat box both.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Great. All right, thank you everybody for doing that. Okay, I'm going to turn my screen off and turn it over to Judy.
Well, thank you everyone for coming today, and thank you, Diane, for inviting me to speak to the ARC in Northern Virginia. I'd like to start today with a little bit of my background and take you back to the 1960s. My brother was 5 years old when he was diagnosed with what was then called minimal brain dysfunction. That was the name for ADHD in those days. And I was older than him, and I watched as my mother began advocating for him, sitting with him doing homework, typing up everything with him, just going in and advocating with the school when there were no laws in place, and watching her get him through school. And through that process, I learned a lot about working with students who are neurodiverse. And of course, that became what I did for life, and really feel very fortunate to have lived this life. My mother, it turns out, also had dyslexia. My father had OCD. None of them were diagnosed at the time. But so I was immersed in it. And of course, then I married someone with ADHD and dyslexia. So I just wanted to make sure I kept it all in the family. But I was immersed in this life. And so when I decided to become a college counselor, it was with the intention of helping those students who really needed help, who really needed to know that they were in a place that was going to help them be successful. So what I hope that I can give you today is some information that you can take to make better and more informed choices for your children. So today we're going to talk about what it means to be ready for college and what are some of those post-secondary options that are not specific colleges. And then we'll also talk about the range of support that's available in colleges today. And then I have some resources to go over as well. So I'd like to start here with some basic foundations that are important to know. When you are thinking about a student's readiness for college, you need to think about their academic needs, their emotional, social needs, and overall fit is really important. For students who learn differently, they really need to make sure that the space that they're in, that the program that they're in is going to meet their needs. And the process should be student-driven. So if you are doing a lot of the work for your child who is planning to go to college, then you need to think about whether your child is ready for college right now, or maybe you need to think of some other options, because the process of going through college applications is part of being ready for college. So here, when we talk about college readiness, as I mentioned, we talk about your academic ability, emotional regulation, and social skills. And if you notice, the three-legged stool in the middle has 3 even legs. And if you take out one leg, what's going to happen? Okay, it's not balanced. So each of these is equally important in being ready for college. A lot of times we hear, oh, but my son was so academically ready and he, had really good grades. And that's important, but that's not everything. You could be academically ready and not emotionally or socially ready, in which case you might want to think about an alternative path. Or you could be mature emotionally, have really good social skills, and have weak academics. But that is something that you can actually use to be ready for college, because your academic ability, even though you might think it's weak, there is a college that it's going to fit in. So it really depends individually on the student. Here's one of my favorites, cartoons. Here's somebody who had no problem doing his PowerPoint presentation, but it wasn't about his homework. So how do we foster this independence and self-advocacy? What can you do as parents to do that? So all along, as your children are growing up, they're all very different. Their social emotional growth doesn't match up with their academic growth. And we know that your children and my children, they grow up at their pace. But the more that you can give them in terms of learning to be a self-advocate, discussing what their strengths are, helping them feel good about what they can do well, the more ready they are to take on more responsibility. So when you give them that independence and you help them learn how to be a self-advocate, it helps them develop a sense of purpose, and it allows them to be motivated themselves. It can also help them with their self-esteem, which we know often gets damaged from the outside world, from school, peer groups. And it helps them develop a confidence that they can carry all their lives. And also, ultimately, will help them then take ownership and responsibility for their learning, because that translates to all aspects of their life. So thinking about, someone who's 5 or 6, if your child can help you put the laundry in the laundry basket, in the washer or dryer, and then the laundry basket. If your child's middle school age, maybe your child can help with meals. If your child's high school age, you can start doing some role playing and asking your child to start talking to his teachers first after you've role played what you're going to do, and then you can intervene afterwards. But making them feel sort of empowered to handle things for themselves, that really does build a lot of self-esteem and confidence. Next. So here we have a cartoon with, and I'm one of them too, parents who, I know my child can be independent, but I really can do better. I can handle it better. And it's probably less stress for the parent to just do it. But in the long run, the goal is for your child to develop into an independent young adult capable of living as independently as possible. And whether college is part of that mix or not, that's a different issue, but the goal really is that gaining that independence. When you're looking at either colleges or programs, it's important to know what you need in terms of psychoeducational testing or neuropsych testing. If you are going to get updated testing, you want to ask for a full battery of testing. You don't need to know specifics of which tests are given, because sometimes the psychologist doesn't know beyond the Weiss and the Woodcock-Johnson what subtests they're going to give until they get started. But if you ask for the full battery of testing, they will test through all the different areas. You notice here it's the Weiss 4 for 16 years and older. Many of you probably have a WISC done for your child before 16. Colleges and most programs are going to want a Weiss. So most of them want this within 3 years of when you're attending. So if you didn't update recently and you can wait, it's best to wait if you can the summer before senior year or during senior year or even the end of junior year, as long as your child's over 16. And then if you are looking at college, you want to make sure that if there is an issue with foreign language or a math disability, that you make sure that the tester puts in a specific rationale for math and foreign language substitutions. Some schools will offer an exemption, but what that means is if the school allows for the substitution, then your son or daughter can take a culture course or do foreign travel and some other way to make that, fulfill that requirement. Math is a little trickier, but some colleges have what they call a quantitative requirement, not a specific math requirement. And that means it can be math related, math science related. So it could be the music of math. It could be a history of mathematics. It could be things about math that aren't calculus or algebra. So ask those questions and see if you can work around a math course if you don't have to take one. And looking at colleges, the difference between college and high school in terms of accommodations is that high school is under the education law, IDEA, and college falls under ADA 504, which is higher ed in the workplace. And the difference is that the ADA talks about access, not modifications. So they are providing you access. They want to make sure that you can access the curriculum. And so some of the accommodations they offer are different. Some are the same, some aren't needed that you might have gotten in high school. Like for example, front row seating. That's not something you really have to worry about because students usually find their own seating. But these are some of the more common ones that you might not be familiar with. Note takers. A good accommodation is when a note taker is not known to the student getting the notes. The way it should work is that the professor makes an announcement that we need a note taker for the class. The students who volunteer go to the learning center. They get set up either through an upload on a computer or just handwritten notes, Xerox. And the students, and there are more than one usually, the students come in and pick up their notes and don't know who the note taker is. And the note taker doesn't know who's receiving them. That's truly an accommodation. So if you're going to visit colleges, you want to ask, are the note takers anonymous? Because that's really important. That tells you a lot, that they understand the importance of making this an accommodation, not just a favor to another student. Priority registration can be beneficial. I like to recommend that students spread out their classes, and some students, as you see here, like late class start, really can't get up in the morning, and it's not productive for them to have an 8 o'clock class. So that can be an accommodation. And you also want to make sure there aren't too many heavy reading courses or courses that are in your child's area of weakness in the same semester. And then again, reduced course load. I always recommend that students start with 12 credits if they're going to college full-time. 12 to 18 is full-time. It's very important to start off with a reduced course load so that you have a better understanding of how much time you need to get the work done outside of class. And then I mentioned the foreign language substitution, which is a very important one, and it does need to be written into your report along with all the other accommodations that you would like the psychologist to include. So how do you decide on what's important when looking at colleges? There are 2,300 four-year colleges around the country. How do you know where to start? What I like to recommend is that you sit down as a family, and if your child's willing, have your child make a list, and you make a list, and then you meet and talk about it. But see if you can come up with your top 5. This is, of course, just a sample. What matters to you? Is it distance from home? Is it the location? Maybe you want to rule out all urban schools because it's too much noise. How much support do you need? And we'll talk about that in a little while. But how much support do you need? What kinds of programs do you need? Do you need social support? Do you need academic support? Do you need executive function coaching? The cost, of course, is a factor. However, there are many, many scholarships and merit aid for a lot of students. So you cannot look at the sticker price, so to speak, because most people don't pay that. So keep in mind, until you get that your package after acceptance and look at the bottom line, the net number, you won't know what it's going to cost you. And then the class size. Those are just some examples. There are many others. Safety on campus, a lot of things. The one thing you'll see here that I don't recommend as your top 5 is majors. And that's because in this situation, you could find the right major, but if your child doesn't have the support to stay in the school, it doesn't matter if it's the best major or the college that has that major and they're the best in the world. So it's a combination. Of course, major matters, but I wouldn't look at schools from the major standpoint. I would look at a variety of options and make sure that the major exists at the school, but also make sure that the other factors are there. And that's very important, especially when you look at a list that has 15 schools on it and the only thing in common is the major, and you realize one is urban, one is rural, one has a lot of support, one doesn't, one has huge classes, one doesn't. They can't both be the right fit. So you need to really think about what matters to your child. And then when you go to visit, you've got a list of 5 categories that you can compare apples to apples from each college. So here, do we have a disability or a difference? I like this one a lot because it really speaks to those students who are all kinds of neurodiverse learners. And we know that they can't all do the same things well. Everybody has different strengths, and using our strengths is what helps us succeed. So let's talk about some of those alternatives to college. So what do we mean when we talk about not going to college? Fortunately, there are so many options today that didn't exist even 10 years ago. Now that more and more students with intellectual disabilities, developmental disabilities, autism are going to higher education, more programs are opening up to serve their needs. 30 years ago, this is what the case was with learning disabilities. The government was offering grants for people to open up programs. And so programs opened up and they were funded initially so they could get started. Now we have funding for programs for students with intellectual disabilities who are looking at non-college options. And fortunately, those are cropping up all over, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes also. So the first, here is a postgraduate year, and then there are transition programs, life skills programs that are focused on developing that independence. What they could also be involved with college or career, and then internships specifically, and then gap year programs. So I'm going to break those down a little bit. Let's first look at the PG year and transition program. So what this is a year out of high school. It can be at a boarding school that has what they call a PG year, postgraduate year. It could be at a college that has a program that's separate from the university, but it's on the college campus. And it can also be a standalone transition program. But all of these are in preparation for college. So these are students who maybe have poor executive functioning skills, might need to beef up their academics a little bit, and they're not independent learners. Remember what I had said earlier, that if a student has weak academics, but they're very strong in their maturity and their ability to plug away and work, and they're resilient, they can go to college, they're ready. But if they're also not an independent learner and they've had a lot of scaffolding and tutors and people really supporting them, they need to learn how to do that before they attempt college. And then the independent life skills programs. These are focusing on, many are for students with autism and social communication challenges, because they're developing all those life skills that are important in the job field, in the world of careers, in the world of college. Some students are college bound here and some students are career bound. And it doesn't really matter because there are programs for both, and some programs combine the two. You have options to do either. And this is for a student who does not do the daily activities of life by himself. Waking up, taking medicine, self-care, showering, getting dressed, maybe cooking something or making a simple breakfast. Typically, someone who has poor communication skills or social anxiety, poor executive functioning, so they're not able to get where they need to be, they're not able to organize their work, and they need one-on-one, either academic tutoring or career coaching. So they're needing to develop those skills with someone other than their parent away from home, so they can learn to rely on themselves and gain that confidence that they can do it themselves. And it's nothing, I've been in that situation myself. It's not that the parent doesn't want to help, but we all develop these relationships that the patterns are hard to break. I know even as an adult, when I went home to my parents' house, I became that child again. There was just something about the dynamic of being in the house I grew up in and being with my parents that changed who I was. And so when you're away for a year, the good thing is your child can come back and you now have more of an adult relationship because of that separation. And then you can form new rules and new boundaries and new ways of interacting. And then internship programs. This is a time for students, and many students take internship programs. Maybe they're burnt out from high school. They were so stressed in high school, they needed time. Maybe they're just not ready, they don't have direction. But it also helps them develop that time management and organization, and helps them develop a strong work ethic, so that even if they're not in class, they're developing the ability to get to work on time, to be a good employee, to follow directions, and to manage their life. So it's almost like going to college for that first year, getting all the social pieces out of the way, getting all the living pieces out of the way, without worrying about ruining your grades if you're not ready for the academic piece. And then when you go as a freshman the next year, you're more ready. And I hear students tell me all the time, these other freshmen are so immature. Why are they acting like this? And I just laugh and say, that would have been you last year, but look how you've grown. So when we think about colleges that are programs, well, let me start back. There are colleges that offer programs for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And this is what I was talking about earlier. Think College is a wonderful website and program that was developed through NCLD, National Council for Learning Disabilities, through a government grant, and they help colleges develop these programs. Some of them are 4-year, fully inclusive certificate programs, where the students go to classes with the other students, with the neurotypical students. They have modifications in their assignments, but they get the support that they need, but they're going to regular classes. Some of them also live in traditional dorms and live with other students who are typical students, and they're hand selected. They usually will put them in a dorm or a house that is smaller and allows for interaction between the students so that they can learn some of the social niceties of being a college student. And they also complete internships. Sometimes they go to classes in the morning. They might take 2 classes with the other students. And then in the afternoon, they might have an internship that they go to. But they can participate in all the campus activities, clubs, the gym, sporting events. They're completely immersed in the college. And they're paired with peer mentors, whether or not it's the dorm peer mentor or it's someone who comes in and works with them in the program. But that's what they do. And the idea for this program is becoming work ready, becoming career ready, but also having a college experience, being able to spend 4 years in that traditional way that you've always wanted to do and not worry about whether the classes are too hard because they're modified. Again, I mentioned Think College, and just to continue on with the 4-year programs, these experiences may also include academic enrichment, where they might work on some of those remote skills or some of those remedial skills, socializing, and looking at life skills, self-advocacy, helping them develop that. And their work experiences are integrated as well. And then developing career skills that lead to employment. So it's not always the same. Every program has a slightly different way of doing it. Some of them are not even residential. So they're just for local students who come for maybe 6 hours a day. Some of them are residential. Most of them are residential, I should say. Here are some examples of programs that offer these. And there are many, many others. And the number at the end is the number that are in the program. So you need to divide that by 4 to see how few students are actually accepted each year. And this to me is one of the downsides to these programs. I always worry about a student getting excited about a program that might get 300 applicants for 15 spots. The good news is that since more and more colleges are opening up these programs, that's less of an issue. The REACH program at the College of Charleston was one of the few, it's one of the oldest, and it was one of the few, and they were only taking 10 to 12 students a year, and they would get hundreds of applications. And I would tell parents, I worry about recommending it because your child will be crushed by not getting in. So, like I said, now it's better. Mason Life at George Mason, the Threshold program at Lesley University up in Cambridge is an excellent, that's a 3-year program. Beyond Academics at UNC Greensboro, and they came up with a larger number of students, and they also started without housing, and now they have housing, so they have grown. Millersville University has an integrated studies program. I haven't gotten a chance to visit it yet, but it's really, really a great program. Students are going to classes, it's small, which it's harder to get into, but it's also more intimate, and the students really interact with the traditional students. And then Inclusive U at Syracuse University. And this is an interesting program. Syracuse actually has excellent learning support in general. They have a new coaching program for executive function coaching that they take a limited number of students and they fill up. But this Inclusive U, the students live among the other students, and they have a buddy, they have a peer mentor, and they go to classes with their student. And they also are taking classes in their area of interest. So they get a certificate in their area of interest. So they can take classes that maybe are business classes, and the curriculum's modified. So they get a certificate. And I think this is a 2-year program, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, so those are just some. And you can go on Think College and you can look up a state and you will see all the programs, and they give a lot of really good information about whether it's residential, what they do, where they live. And it's very, very comprehensive. Then there are the standalone programs. And these are the ones that I was mentioning on the previous slide, where it can be, they have programs for intellectual and developmental disabilities, and they also have programs for students who have autism and who can go to college. So you have 3 programs here: college internship program, college living experience, and Minnesota Independence College and Community. Obviously, the third one is in Minnesota. College living experiences, they have 1 center in Rockville, Maryland, and they have 5 others around, I believe 5, maybe 6 now, around the country. And college internship program, there's one in the Berkshires in Massachusetts, and one in Melbourne, Florida, and several others in the rest of the country, out in California as well. And Minnesota has 1. And what they offer training in careers or college courses. So students are all learning their life skills. They are getting training, and this is true of all the programs. They're getting training in keeping their apartments clean. They're getting nutrition lessons, how to cook, money management, how to manage your money, how to, I'm not sure what it's called anymore, but what we used to call balancing your checkbook, how to manage your money and know what the cash flow looks like. And simple consumer math, so that you know about money, current events, talking about what's going on in the world, a very strong social component to understanding the social give and take of having a conversation with another person and being interested in what they have to say. So they do a fabulous job of developing all of these. And then the students take 1 or 2 college classes, or they go into the career program. And if they're taking a class, all of their tutoring is through the program. They live at the program, and they travel usually across the street or down the road to the college. There is another program that I didn't mention on here that I should have put, and that is Chapelhaven, which is in Connecticut. And Chapelhaven is a standalone program for students with intellectual developmental disabilities, autism, that isn't a college component, but it's much more career focused. And they have a lifelong program where they've just recently started, and this is going to be the case in many of these programs, where they recently started opening up and developing communities so that students can stay in the community. They're comfortable there, they might have a job there, they have friends, and they can stay there. Thank you, Anne. College Steps. Someone recommended College Steps. That is another program that works with NOVA that really supports the students who are going to any NOVA, I think it's any NOVA campus, but there are also programs that you can do remotely. There's another one called Focus Collegiate out of Boston, where you can have that support remotely. So there's a range of options that are available. Okay. So there are many, many paths to get to your endpoint. And the end point, as I mentioned earlier, is success. College may be on that road to success, but college is not the end point. The reason I say that is because I have worked with families who have come to me with a college graduate a year or so out of graduating, saying, my son is back home. He doesn't have any job skills. He doesn't feel comfortable interviewing. He can't get a job. So the degree itself is not the goal. The goal is, while you're working on the degree, you're learning how to integrate what you need to have to get a job, to go into a field of interest, to socialize with other people. And that's what the goal should be. Because as I said earlier, the goal is for your child to develop into an independent young adult, as capable as possible of living independently as much as possible. Of course, everyone's different, but these are just some ways, if you look at it, that you can see the path. Some students leave high school, take a gap year, and they can go right to college. Some students go from high school to a life skills program, and they might stay there for a year or two, and then they might go to college, they might go to work. Then you have students who maybe need a lot more support, and they might go to a postgraduate year or a transition program, and then they still have lots of options. They might still need a gap year. They might need life skills. And then they can either go to college or into the workforce. So there is no one right path, and there is no timeline. So keep that in mind. You know, it's a myth that everybody goes to college for 4 years and graduates in 4 years. Okay, many students, in fact, they use an average now for college of 6 years, because more students are transferring, taking breaks, coming in late. So there really is no urgency. My daughter, who had mental health issues and severe anxiety growing up, she was sort of in and out of community colleges for a few years, but when she turned 25, then she suddenly, that light bulb went on. She also has ADHD, so the light bulb went on. The executive functioning was sort of coming to adulthood, and she says, okay, now I'm ready. And at 25, she grabbed all those credits she might have had from these different colleges and graduated, actually magna cum laude. I don't say that to brag about her, but to show what's possible, with a degree in psychology, and then went on and got a master's, and she does addictions counseling. She's works for a center now, but that wasn't until she was in her 30s. So if you think about your son or daughter, and they're 18 now, many of them are socially and emotionally 13 or 14. So their social emotional development has to catch up before they understand that they're ready and they have a purpose. I actually also meet with a lot of 27, 28, even 30 somethings years old who say to me, I tried community college and I thought I wasn't smart enough and I just dropped out. You know, someone with dyslexia who didn't get help. And then they come back to me and they go, you know, I am smart. It took me all this time to realize I want to go back to college. And they start back to college and they're incredibly successful because they have matured. So most 18-year-olds, even neurotypical students, are not ready for college. They're not thinking of college about their future. They're thinking of, this is the next step and this is going to be fun because I see all these movies about it and I hear all these people talk about it, but they forget that the reason they're going is to get an education, because some of them, it's the first time they're on their own. So keep in mind, there is no one path that is correct for everybody. Okay. And let's talk about a gap year. People often say, well, what would I do during my gap year? You know, it's really a misnomer, gap year. It really should be a year on versus year off. You're still learning. You're still going through the process of developing your sense of self, of developing your confidence. And there are many, many ways that you can do this. You can do an actual program. There are programs. You can travel with a group. You can do community service locally or away. There are internships that you could do locally or internship programs. And you can also get a job for a year to develop that work ethic living at home, or you could go away. But the goals of a gap year should be very, very specific. It is not a year off to decide, I don't feel like doing anything. It's a year to develop leadership skills or to gain that confidence you need to go on to the next phase, to develop social skills. Whether you're home or away, you need to work on those in some way, and to develop that emotional growth that may not come for a while. And then again, of course, independence. And again, it's as much independence as possible. We know that not everyone is going to be 100% independent living on their own, but we want them to have that sense of doing as much as they can. The other thing about a gap year, and I do want to mention a local program, and it's called Broad Futures, and it's a wonderful internship program that's local. So you live at home and you go 5 days a week, you're working at an internship, and there are so many companies in the DC area, in Maryland and Virginia, including, I know Chris Van Hollen's office, provides an internship. I know a lot of the companies in DC do, where students can work 4 days a week, and the program teaches them how to be an employee, how to create a resume, what it means to work with other people. And then on Fridays, they have more of a social type of situation, and they also do some learning. The program is called Broad Futures. And Jackie, would you put that in the chat, please? So people can see that. Okay. Okay, I think that's good for that. But the key is that there are many different things you can do during a gap year, and you need to know what is best for your child. Okay, so now let's talk about colleges. So when you look at colleges and you have students with ADHD, and you have students with specific learning disabilities, even students who have anxiety and have mild depression as part of their profile, you want to be very careful that you select colleges that are really supportive and that really believe in learning differences, that believe that all learners are valued, and that the culture of the campus is such that they recognize all types of learners, and they educate the faculty to make sure that they understand how the differences among the students. So these are categories that I created to differentiate what colleges offer. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, this is a chart that shows you the spectrum of support. When you look at the left and you see the basic ADA compliance, those are colleges that by law, every college is required to provide accommodations, but they don't all provide it in the same way. So I'll give you an example. In a basic ADA compliant school, you're sitting in a classroom, taking a test, and you have extra time. Well, the class ends and you have to leave because another teacher's coming in to teach another class. So your professor says, please come with me to my office and you can finish your test there. So you get up in the middle of maybe a great essay that you're writing, you go to the professor's office, you settle in, you start working again, and the professor has office hours. So students are in and out, the phone is ringing, the door is closing, but you got your extra time. And by law, that's all that's required. A distraction-reduced setting is not a requirement. So if you think about it, think about what your child needs. There generally is a dean who's provided with the title of 504 coordinator. I was visiting a school down in South Carolina a number of years ago, and we were doing a tour with college counselors, and we had set up to meet with all the learning specialists at the schools we visited. And a woman walks in and says, "Hi, I'm the nurse at the school. And this year I was given the responsibility to provide accommodations for students." And boy, was that a lot to learn. I spent the whole summer trying to learn it all. And we were all just sitting there, our mouths dropped open. That's the ADA coordinator at some schools. Yes, we'll give you accommodations that you get, but that's all we do. So thinking about what works for your child, that probably isn't a good college. Fortunately, most colleges fall into the moderate category, where they have a sensitivity to learning differences. They offer a lot of accommodations. They have at least a professional with a background in psychology or social work or learning differences. They care enough to advocate or help the student role play so that the student can advocate. They have a learning center, generally a place for students to take tests. They might have professional tutors. They also might have peer and professional tutors. So that's a question to ask. Some of them have programs that in the summer you can go and gain some of those skills. They have workshops, they have early orientations, and they might have some coaching as well. So that ranges from a little better than basic ADA compliant to all the way as good as a program that I'm going to talk to you about in a minute. So it's a wide range of category, but it is fortunately one in the middle that gives a good amount of support. The second side of the slide is programs. And these are fee-based because they are limited in number. So you're applying to a program along with applying to the college. The program is part of the college. You pay an extra fee because you're getting individualized services. They also have programs, if you see the comprehensive and the social support, the comprehensive is for students who need academic support, maybe EF coaching, and the social support are students who have autism or ADHD with social anxiety or any social communication challenges. And that way they can get the support they need and still go to class. So let's look at the social support. If you have a student with autism who is academically capable, he's going to be fine in his 15 hours a week of class. But what happens for the other hours when there's unstructured time? Does your child normally go to his room and then just wait, or get online or wait for someone to call and say, let's do something? Well, these programs have a central location and they're very likely to have planned activities. So they might say Friday night, we're all going to going bowling, or we're going to a movie. Let's all meet here at 6 o'clock and we'll go together. That gives the student a chance to do a planned activity and get involved and develop friendships among the other students. So that just gives you a little bit of the differences between them. And these are some examples of colleges that fall into these categories. Moderate support, I was looking for some colleges around here. I put in UNC Chapel Hill just to show that the amount of support provided by a college has nothing to do with the selectivity of the college. There are Ivy League schools, 2 of them, who are really great with students with autism and other learning differences, and there are others that are not. So just because they're in a selectivity category, it's not, or even size, it doesn't mean anything. You have to individually find out about the college. So these are the moderate support, comprehensive programs here. You can see some examples, and these are social support programs. And when you know that they have a comprehensive program or a social support program, that tells you that if you don't need the program, but you just need some services, that you're going to have very strong services because they're the same people who are at these programs. Okay, next. So who can tell me what college, or who can tell me? So, right in the chat. Sorry, I'm forgetting that I'm not live here in person. How many colleges in the country are exclusively for students with learning disabilities or learning challenges? Does anybody want to put in? Somebody has a two. Okay, 5, 1. Question mark. Okay. The answer is Beacon College, which is in Leesburg, Florida, Landmark College, which is in Putney, Vermont, and that's all. So when people say, oh, my son doesn't want to go, or my daughter doesn't want to go to a college that's got all kids with learning differences, I can say to the parent, great, then we can eliminate 2. And you still have over 2,000 colleges out there. The most you will find, if you are looking for a mainstream college, the most you will find is 30% of the student body would be 30% of the student body. I'm sorry, let me clarify. Shepherd College in Wisconsin is for intellectual disabilities, I believe. And so I didn't put it in this category because these are among credit-bearing colleges, because I know Shepherd well, and it's an excellent place. And so, so looking at colleges, you'll never find more than 30% of the students using the learning support services in any college. Once they get to that point, they start to feel like they're being known as that. And years ago, the University of Vermont, and in more recent years, Lynn University, changed their model of advertising and downplayed that they had a really good support system, even though they still do. Lynn has changed. If you remember, if any of you know Lynn University, at the time they had the debates for the presidential election, the previous election. And during that time when they were getting well known, they were known as a school for learning disabilities. And now they're known for all kinds of learners. And when I went on their website one time right after this happened, I right away emailed Marcia Glines at the time, who was the head of the department, and said, what happened? Did you guys get rid of the Institute for Learning? She goes, no, we just have a different philosophy now. They're changing things around. That used to be their front page. Now it was sort of buried a little bit. So, but you should know that if you want a mainstream college, any college is a mainstream college. And you could also look at Beacon and Landmark. Now, I want to talk about them for a minute because Beacon College and Landmark College started out very, very far apart. Beacon College was founded by families, and most of their children were not college capable, but they could take some courses, and it didn't even start out accredited. Over the years, it became accredited. It's gotten stronger. It has grown. It has a fabulous president who's got President Haggerty, who's got long-range vision for the school, and it's phenomenally doing well. Landmark started as a school for students with ADHD, and it did an excellent job, but it was for very, very bright students with ADHD. But they had to be willing to buy into the support. No one was spoon feeding them. No one was getting them up in the morning. So you had to know that you were ready for it. Now, Landmark has gone on to include, students with dyslexia, and they now have a social pragmatics program, and they have a wider range of students. So now, probably in the last 5 years, is the first time that I've ever put Beacon College and Landmark College on the same students' college list. But they have both come from different sides towards the middle where they could be a good match for a number of students. And they have wonderful online virtual tours that you can do. So these are other options to consider in terms of what you might want for your students. And these are some resources that you can look at for college planning. These are general college planning, and then the K&W guide you might be familiar with. Mary Beth Kravitz and Wax wrote, and I know they've updated it a few times. That's a good starting place. And then online, my product, College WebLD, which is free right now during the pandemic. We've opened it up. So I will say, I got a call from someone yesterday. If you're using your phone, it may not work as well as if you use a computer for the initial login. So just in case that happens, I've been getting some emails. College Express is a great place that has lots of lists. Think College, I mentioned to you earlier. College Navigator is the government site that gathers all the data from the colleges. Every college is required to provide data each year. And then the college puts it together. It's in iPads, if those of you know that, but it's just called College Navigator. And it's a year or so behind in information, but it gives you a general idea. And then the Peterson's Guide also is online, and that's a little bit more updated. They update in August for that next year. So you've got pretty much updated information. So those are some ways for you to do research. And that's pretty much all for the presentation. And what I would love to do is take questions and see how I can help you answer them.
Okay, thank you, Judy. That was great information. Just as a reminder, I will be sending out a link to the recording today, and I emailed you all the slides already, so you should have them, but they'll be in the email I send out later. Okay, there was a question in the chat box from earlier on about do the programs for ID take the ACT or the SAT or GPA? How do they select the students for those programs?
Great question. No, they don't need the programs that are non-college. Yes, they don't need GPA or test scores. It's more of an interview and reading your psychoed documentation to make sure that you qualify within their range of, they might have an IQ range, for example, that might be, you know, it could be 75 to 90 or 75 to 85, but if you're over 85, you're not in, you know, things like that. And it's an interview process. So it's very individualized by the program of who they're looking for.
Okay, thank you. How do students who are age 17 but tested at grade level 7 to 8 in reading, writing, etc., go to college?
Well, there's a lot of answers to that. Are they reading at that level visually, and are they auditorily able to read at a higher level? You know, if they're listening to books and they're at level on listening, they can go to college. If they are resilient and hardworking and really push themselves, there are a few colleges that will look at students who are very, very low, and they can take courses at these colleges that have low GPAs, have students that come in that have low GPAs. But on the other hand, they can go to a program that would be like, I didn't mention Mansfield Hall, which is another one, but a program that would support them in their independence and give them a part-time college. So it really depends, you know, the reading itself isn't enough information for me to make it decide, that those are just some possibilities.
Okay, this one's long. I have a question as to which college options are best for a person with IDD and autism that is looking for further support after high school, that wants to gain valuable skills to gain employment or just take common classes. I'm looking into college options, which is why I wanted to inquire more about the choices for those with autism or IDD, as I would like to start learning more about those choices for myself.
Think college is the place to go if you're looking for programs for IDD. That's the premier source of where everything will be found.
And this is a little bit separate from college, but do you have any experience with the Woodrow Wilson Rehab Center? What is your take on that?
I have experience with it. I've had students go there. I don't really have an opinion one way or the other. I don't know enough about it to give it a rating of any kind. I know it's great to have locally, but I really don't know much about it.
I will say to the person who asked that question, I actually have a meeting with someone from the Woodrow Wilson Rehab Center on Monday, and we're planning for them to do a presentation later this month. So they'll be able to offer more information, get more questions answered. Is a full battery of testing needed for a student to get services at schools?
It depends on the school. Most schools want a WACE and a WIS, a WACE and a Woodcock-Johnson, and whatever subtests are needed. So it's hard to say if, for example, let's say autism hadn't been diagnosed, the tester is going to want to do more to get to the root of the issue. So it's hard to say. What the reason I say full battery is because you don't want to eliminate an area that might be a subtle issue that you just never uncovered. Students might have been diagnosed with ADHD, anxiety, depression, but it was really autism. And so you don't want to cut it short, and say, oh, I just want you to do these two because that's what's required. So it's individualized. I would say that if you know the program you're going to, you ask them what they need. That's the best way.
Let's see. Are accommodations provided in trade schools? Do trade schools follow IDEA?
It's individualized again by the school. There are two two-year colleges, Penn College of Technology and Vermont Technical College, that offer certificate programs. So 1 year and offer AA degrees, and some of them offer bachelor's degrees, but you can get a certificate and they are very supportive. So if they take federal money, they have to comply with ADA, and most of them do. So if it's a private trade school, that is a whole different thing. I don't know, how that might play out because it's individualized.
Let's see. What is the time of year to apply to independent skills programs?
They usually have a longer time frame because a lot of students don't apply till later. I would say you want to make it known that you're interested by the fall of senior year. And as long as you're in their pipeline and they know you're interested, most of the programs are not going to fill your space without asking you. Like we saw you came and visited last year. Are you still interested? Because we're starting to fill up. So it's show your interest first, even if you haven't decided on it. But you can apply as late as April or May of senior year in many cases, but not in all.
There's a question here about, are there more options for high school graduates? If this means, in addition to the things that Judy talked about, there are employment service organizations, if that's what I'm not sure if that's exactly what your question is about, but in the information that I send out after this, the 2 guides that I'm going to direct you to lists all of the employment service organizations in our area and different opportunities for after high school, so that transition to adult services. And I'm happy to answer any questions about those. Let's see. Is there a place in DC that's similar to the Woodrow Wilson Workforce Center? Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Let's see. Would testing through the school system count, or does it have to be private?
No. Testing can count through the school system if you can get it. I mean, sometimes it's hard to get near the end by junior, senior year. But if you can get it through the school system, that's great. As long as they do the psychological and the educational, and they do both parts. Are there certain financial resources to look at for these programs? It's state by state. Some states will allow you to take DARS funding out of state. Some won't. I know Maryland doesn't. I'm not sure about, Virginia. But there are scholarships, that some of the programs offer. It's worth asking. But, some of these programs are very, very expensive, the private ones for sure. But the ones that are on the college campuses, you're actually paying the exact same college fee that you would pay if you went to the college. So that way you get the financial aid, the funding from the government and all of that. You can get scholarship, merit money and such from the colleges.
Thanks, Judy. There's another question. Aside from Mason Life, are there other local programs that could provide students with the college living experience and support without the academic rigor? I have heard of a program at GW, but haven't been able to find any information.
I'm not familiar with a program at GW. College living experience in Rockville uses Montgomery College. So that's one option. But that's it locally.
Judy, I just want to confirm the two technical schools or trade schools that you mentioned. One was Penn College
of Technology.
Penn College of Technology. And the other one was Vermont Technical College?
Yes.
Let's see. Are you aware of independent scholarships specific to neurodiverse students?
Yes, as a matter of fact, Wiser, an organization that a lot of professionals in the DC area belong to, has a scholarship every year. I think it's $2,000. So it's not a lot of money, but it's something. Students write an essay and they have to talk about why this is important to them. And you can go on the Wiser website. You know what? Email me. If you can't find Wiser, you can email me, WISERDC, I think, .org. But if you can't find it, email me. And the other is ask your state senator, because a lot of state senators in their districts have scholarships that they provide for students with disabilities, I mean.
Great. Okay, for the IDD programs or college living experience, do you need a high school diploma or is a certificate of completion okay?
Certificate of completion is okay. You're able to come in. If you're not planning to get a college degree, you can just take courses. You can take non-credit courses also.
Right, let me look. Oh, here's another. Are there options for children in wheelchairs who have healthcare issues who need an aid during the day and night?
I'm not sure what the question means about options, but yes, all college campuses have to be compliant. All programs have to be compliant. If you have someone in a wheelchair, it is required that you either have an elevator in a building or you have the first floor class. And if a student needs an aid, the aid can be around with the student. There's no issue with that at all.
Let's see, that might be it. Does anyone else have additional questions? Let me check.
Oh, I just reread the wheelchair question and I'm sorry, but I see aid during the day and night. You can get a single room. That's an option. If the student is going to a college, that child can get a single room. That's an accommodation that's offered. It's a housing accommodation. So that would answer that.
Okay, that might be it. Are there any last questions? I will say if any of you think of additional questions, feel free to either email them to me and I will forward them all on to Judy, or you can contact Judy directly. I think that might be it for the questions. Okay.
There is one more, a homeschool question. And the answer is yes. If you're homeschooled, you certainly are still qualified for programs. Yes.
Oh, good point. I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
No, that's okay. I just saw it.
Good.
Thank you very much for having me today. And thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you, Judy, for taking the time. This is great information. And like I said, this will be emailed to you, but this will also be recorded on or archived on our YouTube channel, where all of our webinars are recorded for future viewing. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.